Hello and welcome to the second section of our CSS course. In this section, we're going to talk about colors, text, and backgrounds. First, we're going to talk about different ways to define colors. Then, we're diving deep inside text styling and all about text. And at the end, we're going to talk about backgrounds and all its styles. So let's just jump in. So let's start from this empty HTML file. Again, we have a style.css file here, which is empty right now. And we have referenced it inside our HTML file. And then using the live server extension, I've run it. So here I have it. Let's talk about colors. As you know, in the previous section, we barely touched the color style for the text. In this video, we're going to talk about different ways to define colors for every element. So color explicitly is about text. When we say color, we just mean the color of the text. So every place you see color, that means the text color. So let's go ahead and add the style. I'm gonna say color red. Now in CSS, we have named colors. Some pre-named, like red means this color that you see here. So instead of red, we can also use this color to its hexadecimal way. So this is another way to define colors. Now you can search about this on Google or read more about this. The last character in hexadecimal is F. So R is all the way up, G is all the way down, and B, which stands for blue, is all the way down again. So red at high. For example, if we change this to something like this, it's gonna turn into green. So red is down, green is high, and again, blue is down. So if you want to make it blue, we can turn all the others down and turn the blue up. So again, it's not our focus right now. I just mentioned this to make it more sensible. If you click on that, this is another way to set the color. It's called HSL. Hue, saturation, and lightness. So this one shows the hue, this one shows the saturation of that hue, and this one is the lightness. So as an example, if we change this to 100%, it will turn into white. As an example, if you want to turn this down, like dark blue, you can reduce the lightness. So you can search HSL and read more about that. And we also have LAB, LCH, OKLab, OKLCH. This is a popular one. Many frameworks out there uses this one. And then we have RGB, just like the hexadecimal one. This one is the number representation of the RGB. Again, we have named one, which I don't remember I've ever used named one. We don't use that in real world. The hexadecimal one, like for black, we can use this one. So we can change it here, it will change that. Sometimes it turns into 8 characters, and this 2 at the end just shows the transparency. You can see if I increase this, it shows the transparency of that. The colors have different ways, but one of the best ways to actually test this is inside the DevTools. I really like this way. Select an element, go to the color, click on the color, and then here, click on this icon that shows you up and down icon. And then you can see different ways of defining colors. So it will give you that. And then you can actually change the color. It will preview that. You like turn it into green, turns into green. Or you can pick up a color, for example. Let's say I want to pick this blue from here and picks up that. And then we can change the color like that. So these are the ways that we can define colors. And it's not just about colors. We can actually change the background as well. So I can say background color, turn it into red, and keep the color here. So now the background color is red. I separated every line, as we talked about in the previous video, should end with a semicolon, except for the last line. We can put it there as well, optionally, but it's not necessary. So right now I'm gonna turn the color to white and the background color is red. So background color is the style for the background. So right now you can see the background is red and the text is white. We can play with that here as well. So we can change the color of the text and the background color. So like this. So just remember that background and color is for text. All right, so if you want to read more about the colors and the ways to define them, always remember to check out the documentation where I have a little bit more explanation about the things there. So you can see we have RGBA, And this A stands for transparency. As we talked about, this was the transparency, or HSL, the hue, saturation, and lightness. Now, let's jump to the text properties. As we go through the course, we're going to use more and more colors, and it's going to be your second nature. So let's talk about text styles. Now for that, I'm going to remove the styles from this H1 element and actually style the text inside our CSS. Now to see this better, I'm going to collapse the sidebar and move the CSS styling to the right panel. So this way we can select the H1 and style it. So I'm going to say H1. I'm going to hit save and check the current state of the text. So you can see we have this text, it's black, and it has nothing. If you look at the DevTools, you can see the H1, which comes from our style.css, is empty. But what about these styles that we have here? Well, these are the style sheet that the browser injects inside the view. For example, there are some default styles for the H1 tag, and that's the reason if we turn this one to H2, it looks smaller than the H1. Well, the reason for that is because the default font size for H2 is 1.5 EM, but for the H1, it's 2 EM. So that's the reason H1 is bigger than the H2. If you remember in HTML, I said that H1 and H2 is not about font size. We can change that in CSS. And this is the exact reason for that. H1 and H2 are about importance or the level. Right, so let's start with this font size itself. I'm gonna say for the H1, I'm gonna say font size. You can see there are some pre-named styles like X large or something, and it overrides this 2 EM. All right, so let's start with this 20 pixels. So this H1 here, you can see has 20 pixels. Another good way of using this DevTools is double click and select that and then scroll up and scroll down. So as you scroll up and scroll down, it will change the values of CSS in DevTools. It's not about the font size, it's about every other value that has number based. You can also do this with up and down arrow. It will work with that as well. By the way, if you hold the shift key, you can increase and decrease it by the scale of 10. If you hold the control key by scale of 100. So it's a very nice way of showcasing stuff here. So this is the font size that we have, the pixel. Other ways to do this is by percent, like 20%. And this one actually comes from its parent's font size. So right now, this H1 is the child of this body element. So if we select the body and add a font size of 20 pixel, so you can see this 20% now is 4 pixel because body has 20 pixel and 20% of 20 pixel is 4 pixel. So theoretically, if we change this, it should change and affect the H1 tag as well. So I'm going to select this and increase the size. There you go. As you can see, it changes the font size of this one. I'm going to remove this one to only focus on the H1 tag here. You can see it has 20 pixel. If I select the body and increase this, like bring it to 100 pixel, 20% of 100 pixel is 20 pixel. It makes sense now. Now with the similar concept, rem and m are the same way. So if we say 2em, this em will represent the font size of the parent element, 2em, which means 2 times 20 pixels. So if we check out this one, you can see the font size for this translates to 40 pixel. And the reason for that is because body has 20 pixel and 2 times 20 is 40 pixel. So EM will talk about the parent. So let's experiment something. Let's go ahead and put this H1 tag inside a div. So right now, the parent element for the H1 now becomes this div, which has no font size. But still, you can see this one still has 40 pixels. And the reason for that is inheritance, because the font size for the div itself is still 20 pixel, which is inherited from the body. Right now, this has 2 rem. Now it's 32 pixels. Why is that? Because rem, unlike the em, doesn't reference its direct parent. It always references the HTML element. For example, when we say toRem, we mean the font size style that we have for the HTML element. So if I go inside HTML and define like font size to 10 pixel, right? So now this one toRem becomes 20 pixel because 2 times 10 is 20. So remember, rem is relative to the HTML element. Em is relative to its parent. I don't want to confuse you, but this is very important because we will repeat this over and over in the whole course. And it's not just about font size. We will also use that in box model, in margins, in padding. So it's very important. As we talked about, we have pixels, we have percents, and we have rem and em. All right, I'm going to remove the styles for body and HTML and only focus on H1 here. And I'm going to also remove the div element that was wrapping this heading tag. I'm going to also change this to 20 pixel. So to make it straightforward, I'm going to add the next style, which is font weight. So font weight is about the weight of the font, as it clearly says. We have 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and we also have named one like bold, bolder, light, normal. So right now you can see the font is normal. By the way, again, we can select it here and change it from here. Like this is 100, this is 200. You can see it gets thicker and thicker. And we have all the way up to 900, which is bold. All right, so this font might not show the weight correctly. We can change that. And actually changing the font itself is our next topic. The way that we can change the font is by font family. These are the default font families that VS Code is suggesting us. We can use any of these, and most of them are supported by the browser. We can use our own fonts, and we will talk about that in next videos. We can import it from Google Fonts, but for now, we're going to use one of these fonts. I'm gonna go with this set, and it's Georgia. And the reason why we have a couple of these is because when we set font family, we're not talking about one font, we're talking about family of fonts. Basically, this is the first font, and if that is not available, the second placeholder font will kick in. And then we have another for the fallback. So it's the family of fonts that we have. We can actually remove others as well. We can just keep one font for all. We have said that H1 should have font of Georgia here. You can see it changed. I can duplicate this and change this to H2. And you can see how they are different. I can add an ID here, say custom font, and then I can add this custom font and bring this font only here. So I'm going to turn this to H1, and both H1 will have the same font size and font weight, but the only one that has this custom font ID will have this new font family. And that's it. And as you can see, this font, this one has Georgia font, but this one doesn't have that font family. So let's change this to something that is more visual, like this one. Now you can see it's different than this one. There's a special font family called System UI, this one, System UI, which basically will show different fonts based on the different operating system. The default font family for Mac OS is this Helvetica. Windows, I believe it's Seagull UI. I guess, I'm not sure. It's this one. It's this one. There you go, we have it here as well. So this is for Windows. And this one is for Ubuntu, and this one I believe is for Mac OS. Now it will show different font families based on the operating system. Again, in future we're going to dive deeper inside font families and external fonts or importing fonts from the font file inside the project directly. Cool. I'm going to remove this, get back to this H1 element, and also remove this H1 and just keep this H1 here. Next is font style, and most of the times it's used only for italic. So you can see it turns that into italic. We can change that here as well. I'm going to remove this, and actually without even selecting it, I can move between these options and see how it affects the font. All right, so these are about fonts. We can also have about the text itself. So the first one is text align. So as an example, right now, text align is center. We have center, we have end, we have justify, we have left. Left and end right now are the same because the direction is left to right. Don't worry about that. So we can set it to right. We have justify. We can put it in center. So this is text align. By the way, you might notice that I have two different blocks for the same element. We can do that in CSS. We can actually override as well. For example, I change the font size here to 40 pixel. Since the CSS starts from top to bottom, it will read this, and when it reaches to this line, it will override the previous value. So the text is right now is 40 pixel. You can see it overrides this previous value. So we can have multiple blocks, but it's not recommended. It's better to put them all in one block to make it clean. Next, we have text decoration. For example, here we have line through, we have overline, we have underline. So most of the time we will use that for line through or underline. Next, we have text transform. As you can see, it capitalized in this case. So I set it to capitalize. So if I turn this to lowercase m, you can see it is still capitalized because of this text transform. You can see if I remove that, it is in lowercase, but if I add text transform, you can see capitalize, full width, it has lowercase that lowers all the characters, or we can make it uppercase. Uppercase is all the letters. These are values that we have for text transform. So in order to showcase the next styles, I'm gonna make this really long. I've repeated the same sentence a couple of times. Again, I'm gonna create it here. We have line height, which is, let's say, 12 pixel. So you can see it just jams somehow or collapses on the previous line. We can increase that so you can see how it affects line height. We also have letter spacing. That is about the basically space between characters and letters. Add space between characters. So to showcase this better, let me just make this only one word. So here we can now see the difference. You can see it adds space between the characters. And the next one is word spacing. I'm gonna set it to 20 pixel. Reload. So this one is about the space between the words and not the characters. So if I make this one only like 3 words, now we can showcase that. I'm gonna disable the letter spacing and play with this word spacing. You can see it increases and decreases the space between the words and not the characters like before. So with this, we have styles for the font, we have styles for the text, and then the behavior of the text in lines. That's it for this section. It's about the text, and we will quickly jump into the background. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the backgrounds. I'm gonna clean up the CSS and also remove the h1 tag from the HTML and keep it empty. I'm gonna also close the HTML file here. I'm gonna bring this image here. You can bring any image you want. This is an example and it's not about image itself. We're going to test something on this. So I just brought this image.png here, and then I'm gonna bring the CSS here and collapse the sidebar. Now I'm gonna create a div element which is gonna stay empty for now, and inside CSS I'm gonna select that div. Now I'm gonna say background, this one, to URL, the path to that file, just like this. So I have selected the div element, then set the background property to this URL with this. And again, inside VS Code, Command or Control and click will open that. Nice. So inside the web, if we take a look at that, you can see we have nothing. It's empty. But if I open the DevTools and inspect this div, you can see it has this image. And if I hover my mouse over the element, you can see it shows the dimensions for the element. And right now it has 432 pixels of width, but the height is 0. And to test this inside CSS, we can add a height like this, and let's set it to 100 pixels. And there you go. Now you can see our image is partially visible. So the height was the issue. So inside our CSS, for now, we're just going to add height of 100 pixel, and we can turn it to 200. So no issues, we can keep that. You can see we have this black here, this black section here, and this black section is part of our image. If I comment this line here, you can see that black section is gone. So that black section is actually our image. Now, this is the background property that we have for the div. It's important to not confuse this with the image tag that we had inside the HTML. This is an image element. It will render the image, but this one is a div element. We can put content inside here, and the background is just about the background style of that element. Here, the image itself is the image. So you can see this is the image, but this is a div with the background of image. Another property that we have for background is called background size. Now, it has auto, contain, and cover. Contain will make sure that the dimensions that we have will contain the whole image. It will just make sure that with the dimensions that we currently have, every part of the image stays visible. So it contains the image right now. And if we set it to cover, cover will make sure that it covers correctly with the entire part, even though parts of the image is not visible, just like now. So let's just get it back to contain, and right now we can see the whole image. And now if I remove the height and here showcase that 100 pixels, you can see it repeats the image because of the height. So if I increase the height, you can see. So this is another issue. So let's just keep this in 100 pixels. You can see we have repeats, and obviously we have a solution for that, and it is called background repeat. We can set it to no repeat. We only have the image repeated once. Let's say this one is the height is 400 pixels and the image grows with the size because the background size is on contain, and it will contain only one image with no repeat. We can change the position of this image because right now you can see that the element is actually 400 pixels. It's too big, but the image is only on the top part. Now to showcase this, let's go ahead and add a background color of red to this element. So now you can see this is the element, but this is the image at the top part. We can change the position of the image as the background of the div element with background position. It actually requires you to provide two values, one for the y-axis and the second one for the x-axis. For example, I say center and center. You can see it centerized the image. Or I can say bottom, it goes to the bottom. So the second center here has no effect because our image is contained. Alright guys, so that's it for this video. You can read more about this stuff in our reference website. You can see we have background shorthand that I didn't talk about in the video. It's not really important. You can read about it inside the reference website. So in the next video, we're going to talk about the CSS box model. So see you there.